So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my latest community podcast during this terrible coronavirus crisis. As you will know, over the last few weeks, I've been interviewing, if you like, or talking to figures from across the community about how they've been coping with the crisis and what measures they've been taking in their day-to-day lives to adapt to it, and indeed how they've been helping across the community. And I'm particularly pleased to have with me today Nathan Thomas, who was until recently of Winton Academy in Andover, a school that I visited I think just before I became the Member of Parliament, actually when I was a candidate, which at that time was in special measures, which now isn't, and seems to be going from strength to strength, thanks to the leadership that Nathan has given to the school. Now, obviously, the school's been going through a difficult time as well, and for all those pupils and parents who are attending the school, I thought it'd be useful to talk to. So welcome, Nathan. Lovely to see you.
Good afternoon.
Now, we had an email exchange early on during the crisis about how Winston was going to cope and the big changes that were going to need to be put in place for you to continue education. How have things gone? What have you been up to, and how's it gone over the last few weeks?
Remarkably well. As you know, all schools closed in the middle of March. We spoke to the students on the day of closure to say we weren't closing, we were just moving to a virtual school. And literally on the Monday morning, our virtual school opened with its very first live assembly. I now find myself a few months later on assembly number 34. We've done that every single day to keep the students engaged. We had the first live lessons take place on that very first day. We've used the Google Classroom, which has just been fabulous. So it's meant that we've been able to have that face-to-face contact with the students on a daily basis. The joys as a manager is also I can see what's going on, so I can pop into those classes to see the children and keep that contact. So the journey from the outset was really positive. We learned a lot very, very quickly. I think like so many people in this crisis, we've had to adapt existing practices. But our philosophy that we came up with quite early on was, the things that we do well, let's find a way to virtualise those. The things that we're really proud of, let's make sure they are maintained. So from the first week of the crisis, we had parent meetings, and we've had those every single week virtually, where parents can come in and hear about how we are helping the students and what we're putting in place for the students. And we've kept our reward systems running to make sure that we're able to say well done to the students. We kept our student voice going. So all those really important parts of the school, the essential non-essentials that are not just about the learning, which clearly is an imperative thing, but that sense of community. And I've been very proud of the way that the students and the staff and all of the community have come together in this crisis to work for the benefit of all. And that's been both within the school and also wider. So we've looked at how we support the local NHS, and with some fabulous, beautiful picture that the students made of all of them with a rainbow that I think I shared with you, saying well done and thank you to them. So it's been, you know, despite the challenges, and there have been some significant challenges for lots of our families, it has been a really positive journey for us educationally.
Oh, well, that's great news. I have to say, as a parent of two 8-year-olds also using Google Classroom, it is quite a good resource, actually. We've found, although it's quite hard to get them to sit still and concentrate in the early days, they have learnt over the last few weeks to kind of deal with it on a daily basis. And it's good to hear that you've been having as much kind of live interaction as possible. I know not all schools have been doing a huge amount of live stuff, quite a lot of homework, essentially. Yeah,
and we found very early, we made a decision early on not to go for paper packs. We made the decision that actually that's not, in our opinion, not teaching. Actually to teach, you need to engage with the young people in some way. And certainly the feedback we got very early on from the students was where there was the equivalent of this, and we've done that safely through Google, because in Google, only students who are part of the AET group can access those classrooms. So it makes it a safe environment for the students and staff to be in. That the students really found that so helpful to be able to ask questions. And obviously we've run a timetable, so the students have got a timetable just like normal school, where they log in for those sessions, do their session, and then move on. So I agree, the Google Classroom, which had been already set up within the AET group so that we had those classrooms ready with all the students populated, has been fabulous.
Okay, great. And you said that you're very pleased with the way staff have responded, which is fantastic, but students obviously have had to adapt, and you've got obviously a critical GCSE year. What's happening around those who are doing GCSEs either next year or this year?
So the grading for this year has been based on teacher assessments. So all of the staff in the school have looked at all of the evidence base that they have for the students based on their mock exams, based on their bookwork, based on current teacher assessments, and then created a grade that they believe is an accurate grade for that student. Then we as leaders have obviously then challenged that data to make sure that we can see the evidence that supports it. And all of that evidence is then used to send to the exam boards a grade that we believe that student would get in the summer. So it's been a rigorous process. Across AET, we do these things called stop the clock assessments, which are really useful because we do those across the whole group. So all of our 21 academies in the secondary all sit the same exam. So we've got some extra moderation across the group, which we've used to make sure those grades are accurate. And then those get submitted in the first week of June. After we've done all the moderation across the group. And then in the summer, the students will still have an exam day because Ofqual will be looking at all of these grades to make a decision about the final grades, because within each subject, we've actually ranked the students from the most secure student within that grade boundary to perhaps the least secure. And so once Ofqual have looked at that across the whole country, they will moderate those results to be broadly in line with last year. So that's current this year, and that's the same for year 13 students. For year 10 students, obviously that's a real concern, because year 10s who are now about to start their GCSE year are going to have some gaps in terms of their knowledge potentially. So we're looking at all sorts of different measures. Obviously, we've had the virtual classroom to support those learners taking place, and that's been successful, and we've seen really positive active engagement with that. But alongside that, we also need to look at this gap that could potentially start to exist between the disadvantaged students, those who are pupil premium. So we're making sure that we are putting in place the summer schools and all the systems that need to be there to support those learners so that when they return to school, we don't have any of those gaps. We've provided an IT to all students who didn't have any. So every single student across AET who didn't have the access to a laptop that's been provided. So it's about £1 million investment across the group to make sure all students, whether disadvantaged or not, have got really good access to the IT, including internet dongles and all sorts. So we know that they are accessing it, and students are making great progress. What's interesting is there's an assumption that actual is better than virtual. Actually, what we're now learning, of course, is that potentially a blended approach to learning and to education is what's worth considering, because we're finding with some groups of learners, the progress they're making in the virtual world is actually more rapid than the progress that they may have been making in actual school. But the caveat to that is that's where there's face-to-face contact with the teacher. So it's so crucial that the teacher is engaged with that. Where you're removed from that and they're sort of just doing it on their own, that's more of a challenge. So because we've got those lessons, they are making progress. But year 10 are a big priority for us as a country, of course.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting what you said. I do think that this sort of virtual learning, if you can get it right, does have big implications for the kind of post-COVID future of education, as it is doing for business and politics and all the rest of it. We've all been catapulted into a new world of technology, and there have been pros and cons. And if we can capture those pros for the future, I mean, one of the issues for younger children, of course, is that the long summer break often sets kids back a bit, actually, in terms of their learning and progress, and there's a bit of catch-up required, and whether that has implications for how they're dealt with over the sort of 8 weeks of the summer is going to be interesting, certainly from my point of view with younger kids. Hopefully you're not seeing too many issues from a kind of isolation point of view. I mean, obviously, the kids that you're looking after that age are very, very social. They're going through a really social time, and being stuck at home, unable to socialise, must be extremely difficult.
Absolutely.
I guess. Yeah, go on.
I mean, what I would say on that, and I couldn't agree more, is we talk about that philosophy from the outset for Winton and all of the academy schools, was looking at the things we do well and virtualising them. And one of the things that Winton does phenomenally well is a sense of community. It is a school that has a huge heartbeat and really, really cares about the individual children. So we've tried to maintain that social aspect in a positive way. For example, we've carried on with our prefect process to make sure the students, so they had their prefect launch event this week. We've had community quizzes every week, which bring both the parents and the staff involved in forums like this. We've made sure that we have the celebration assemblies. I've done some sort of drive rounds and kept social distance, but delivered Easter eggs and presents to students who are just making a fabulous commitment to their virtual learning. So keeping that sense of fun So every single day in our assembly, we set a challenge for the students. It's a daft challenge, it could be juggling balloons or a dance or bake a cake in a certain way. But that's really kept that sense of togetherness. So one of the things that was lovely when I was doing I asked the students in the student voice meeting, what were their initial thoughts, and one of them said that they really felt that even though we weren't in school, we got a sense of the school community, and they felt really proud of the fact they still felt that identity of Winston coming to that virtual classroom. So we're trying to ensure that isolation, of course we're all isolated, we're all in different parts, but bringing a community together can still happen, in this virtual way, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And one of the great things, frankly, about Winton, from my point of view, is, as I said right at the start, when I first visited the school, you'd inherited a kind of school, I guess, which was, at rock bottom, both internally, but in the way it was viewed externally as well. And as far as I can see, over the last 5 years or so, you've done a fantastic job to drag it back. And every time I visited, I've been impressed by your kind of energy and optimism, and how much that has kind of fed into the school and the pupils and the staff. It's been great, but obviously you're now moving on. Big change at Winton, and a new person taking over. Just notwithstanding your achievements, tell us where you're heading, what you're up to, and then who's coming in after you.
Right, so I'm very much staying within the Academies Enterprise Trust. So I've taken on a role overseeing 4 schools. So I've already been working with one of those already, a school in Bristol. So working with 4 schools across the southwest, but still very much working with Winston. So my sort of base is still here, working with that new team as we carry on this drive forward. I couldn't quite leave it alone, if you like. I want to stay very much involved. But Helen Jones joins us straight away after half term. So she's the new head teacher. She's met lots of the students already. She's been involved in lots of these virtual meets and lessons. And we had our Year 6 tea party last week virtually, where we managed to get all the new Year 6s come to a tea party where they baked cakes and has, and she was there to talk to her new cohort. So yeah, she's going to be fabulous, a really great addition to the team. But I'm going to work over 4 schools and hopefully bring together the strengths of all those schools so we can be greater than some of those parts, because there are some great schools in the 4 that I'm working with.
Oh, very good. So you're going to become a kind of Gordon Ramsay, the kind of executive chef sitting over these restaurants, and each will have its own sort of head chef, I guess, who's coached and assisted by you.
Correct, yeah. So it's a new role in AET. So secondary executive directors, we've got a area to oversee in terms of schools and to really drive up the standards in our secondaries, which we're really excited about.
Okay, well that's really reassuring, particularly at a time of enormous change in the way pupils are being taught, that you're staying in touch with the school, as I say, because I think you've done a cracking job. And all those pupils over the last 5 or 6 years that have been under your care have a lot to thank you for, I think, as does Andover as a town. So while we're very pleased that you're staying involved, from my point of view, I wish you the very best of luck with your new role. And I look forward to meeting Helen when things resume, or maybe virtually, who knows. Fingers crossed over the next few weeks the numbers head in the right direction, and we might get a little bit of school before the summer starts, but if not, in the new term as well. Listen, Nathan, that's been fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Great to hear that Winston is in good heart, notwithstanding the really difficult situation that we find ourselves, and that your pupils, students are heading towards a good end to what's been a very, very difficult and unusual year. And also that you're, as I always dreaded you might, moving on to big things. But great that you're staying in touch. Thanks very much. Do you have any sort of final message for the audience who might be listening in the school community?
Just the same as everybody. Just stay safe and look after each other. Kindness is one of the most important qualities at the moment, and really being kind to everybody around us is so key. And as I said all along, this sense of community is so important, and perhaps more important than ever. And Winton being a community school, and we're really proud of that and proud of how we've responded in this crisis.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much indeed. Winton, onwards and upwards. We will be putting this out on Facebook at kit.malthouse, and on Apple and Spotify as a podcast, and on the website, kitmalthouse.com. And hopefully we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.